SandraYancey is on a mission to help 1 million women entrepreneurs each achieve $1 million in annual revenue. She is an award-winning entrepreneur, life and business transformation specialist for the Emmy Award-winning TV show The Doctors, a multi-number-one best-selling author, movie producer, and philanthropist. She is the founder and CEO of EWomenNetwork.
So pretty up here.
Hi.
I feel like such a lady.
Thank you.
That.
We were hoping you would feel special.
Yes, I do. I
Good.
do. On many levels.
Well, we feel really amazed and honored and a little curious about how in the world you fit us in.
Because you called. That's all it took.
Aw.
That's all it took, honestly. You just, decide what's important. I don't manage my time. I actually am one of those people that views the world a little bit differently. I manage my boundaries, and I find that when I manage my boundaries, time takes care of itself. I just don't get involved in things that aren't important, and I get really involved in things that are, and relationships are really important. So when you said, you gave me a little bit of time, notice,
That
so
helps
we could,
a little bit. Yeah.
I just was like, of course I'm going to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and this year has been incredible for you.
Big year.
Personally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Collision of probably my greatest high and my greatest low. Just kind of crashed in midair together. And of course, I, fundamentally think that nothing happens to you, it happens for you. And so I began the journey just trying to figure it all out between, getting the offer to be part of the Doctors.
So some of the people in the room don't know about
Yeah,
that.
so I...
bring us up to speed if you don't mind.
So I have an agent, and I went out on July the 17th and met with a series of production companies over a television show. I, am personally just very concerned. I love all of the, business shows that are out there about helping entrepreneurs, look at their businesses and what's not going well and crack the code and all of that. My concern is that there's no women that are doing that the networks have not officially booked women to do that, and that, even the women that are, like say Shark Tank, I find that in large measure, the women tend to take smaller roles than the boisterous, loud gentlemen that are on the panel. And I'm like, where are the women? So that's really been my driving force, because my mission is crystal clear. It's one sentence: 1 million women each making $1 million in annual revenue. And right? And so I went out and I met with 4 or 5 production companies on July 17th. Last year I had my international conference in August, on August 2nd. And coming out of the conference starts on a Thursday, a week from the conference, we got the call from Paramount and said that they wanted me to be part of the Doctors, which is an Emmy-winning, syndicated television show, been on the air for 10 years. And it was an interim type of role. I mean, I can get into a million details. Suffice it to say, it was a really big opportunity. And I was driving when my agent called, Susan, and she said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Actually, I'm driving. I have you on speakerphone. It's just me, but I'm pulling into, a parking lot." And I said, if I could, give me a minute and let me get, kind of parked here. And because I wanted to pipe Kim in, I could just tell energetically, right, the vibration of the call. I knew it was really good news. And so I pulled in, and I was pulling into the hospital. So I came out of the conference the conference was over on a Saturday. I called to my mother on Sunday, I do a big breakfast with all of my new coaching clients on the Sunday, and then we got home. My daughter was having a major kickoff launch event for her business, and I had wanted to go to that, so Kim and I went to that. Things started to settle down. I called my mother like I do every year after the conference, and you don't have Brahms here, do you? Brahms, it's like a 2 notches above Dairy Queen. And but my mother loves their orange freezes, and so we would pick up my mother very regularly. She'd been ill for about 5 years, and very regularly we would pick her up, and she would ask for an orange freeze. It was made with that orange sherbet, and she just loved it. And we'd go through the drive-through. She was never really strong enough to get her in, but that's okay because she would get it. And she would say to Kim, my husband, she would say, "Take the long way home, son." And we would drive around, and that was kind of what I did. It was kind of our ritual at the conference. And I called her, and she said, "I'm just not up for it. I mean, I'm just not feeling up for it," which didn't overly surprise me. But I also, there was just something different in her voice. It wasn't this like major, exhaustive, alarming thing, just enough different that it bothered me. And I couldn't quite sleep very well that night, and I got up early. And, about 6 o'clock, I started really thinking about her. I knew she would still be resting, and she wouldn't have her hearing aid, so she wouldn't hear me anyway. So I just, I put on my yoga pants and a t-shirt, and she lived 1.8 miles from me. I mean, I could be, if I could get this one light, I could be there in about 5 minutes. And so I just ran up there and went in. I had a key, and I always rubbed her feet. My mother loved her feet rubbed, and I would always rub her feet. And then she knew it was me, and I wouldn't spook her, because when she was sleeping and she didn't have her hearing aid in, I would start rubbing her toes, and she would just smile. I mean, she didn't even have to open her eyes. She knew it was me. And so I rubbed her feet, and I saw the little smile, and I went over, and she likes to sleep on her side. I turned her over a little bit. She did not look well. I called Kim, and I said, "I need you to come up here. We just need to get her to the hospital." And we did, and she never came home. She died September 1st. And so I was actually pulling into the hospital when Susan called me. And I pulled into a parking spot. I got Kim on the line, and she said, we've gotten this, offer from Paramount. And I couldn't believe that it happened from July 17th to, and I was actually surprised because I was expecting an offer from another production company who had really expressed, tremendous amount of interest. And we hung up the phone, and I literally took a picture of it with my phone, because the hospital was going over some going through construction. They're actually building a wing. And I pulled in, and there's a bank of like 6 or 8 porta potties outside my windshield. And I thought, the universe is telling me I'm getting ready to go through a lot of crap. And
Not just one, you needed 6.
There's meaning in everything, you know what I mean? And it was this just trying to juggle this 2 amazingly powerful, impactful realities, together. And so it's been a great year of growth for me, great year of reflection, understanding, acceptance, and transformation, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always inspired when you have shared with me in the past, when you've shared with groups, your mother and your story.
Yes.
I think when I interviewed you for Limitless Women, the book,
Yes.
there were things that I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That I'd really never known
Yeah.
where you had come from. And
Right.
It's easy, I think, for me and for a lot of us to see somebody that's really successful and just think, oh, well, they were just born that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Yeah, I think
not
I
the
was
case.
raised that way through my mother's wisdom. I was the first one in my family to go to college, and but my parents didn't have the money. My mother didn't have the money. My father died on my birthday in a car accident when I was 5 years old, and my mother raised us on welfare for a number of years. I had a brother who was 13 months older than me with a major heart defect, and so a lot of the early messages was, when Ricky could sleep, let's everybody be quiet, keep it down, kind of thing. My mother's from Mexico. I'm first generation American. So my mother is from Mexico, interracial. And so her parents were killed in a car accident. She was raised by the nuns. When I was young, she told me that she was raised in an orphanage. I found out, actually, I was in my 30s before I knew. I'd already had my own daughter before I knew that it wasn't an orphanage. It was a convent, because when her parents were killed, it was a really uncool thing, 86 years ago, to be a mixed race kid. And so she was an embarrassment, and her mother was an embarrassment to the family. And so neither one of the families would take her or her sister or her brother. And ultimately, the nuns took in her and her sister. She was estranged from her brother for many, many years. And he had a very different path based on who took him in. And they came back together over time. My mother came to the United States when she was 17. Because she heard it was the land of opportunity, and GM was building their plant, and so she went to Detroit. And my father evidently came from his own equally dysfunctional family. I still don't know to this day what the dysfunction was. I have never met one member of my father's family. They disowned my father when my father married my mother, because they were embarrassed of my mother. And so, and they're French Canadian. My maiden name's Goulet, and my mother's Lopez. I'm a Heinz 57 mutt on every level. And, they ended up, and he was in construction, and they were building homes. And so he went to Detroit because GM was building the plant, and, he could build homes, and they met each other and fell deeply in love and hoped to create a very different life for themselves and for the family they were going to create. It just wasn't meant to be, And, so I've learned, I met my husband when I was, a senior in high school. I was 17 years old. And I think a lot of our attraction is he too is interracial. And when you come from Dayton, Ohio, there's just not a lot of color.
Not so many good-looking people. The two of you found each other, two gorgeous people, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And, the goal was to try to pass, to be completely transparent. I mean, everybody just wants to fit in,
Right.
And that was our attraction, to each other, I think. We didn't know it at the time, but I think, after falling in love and peeling back, why did these two people out of 7 billion people in the world decide to, converge and fall in love? And from the moment I met him, he's only the second date I've ever had in my whole life. And, we've never been apart. Hasn't been easy, but we've fought for each other, I think. And there's been times he's fought for me when I didn't fight for him, and there's times I fought for him when he didn't fight for me, but one of us just always knew to fight for each other.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even that's a miracle. My mother couldn't believe it, and we lasted. It was like, oh my God, this is going to be the shortest lived thing there ever was. My mother didn't even pay for my wedding. And I had a big catastrophic thing that happened with my wedding gown. And, I went and tried it on, and it was these glued pearls, And I remember trying on the sample and noticing 3 of the pearls missing. And she was telling me they're glued, and they'll, when you get yours, it will be perfect. So when I went in to try on my dress a month before the wedding, I tried it on. It was all wrapped and beautiful and everything, and I put it on. I looked, and I was like, there's 3 pearls missing. And it dawned on me that they went and got the sample dress and had it dry cleaned. And I was brokenhearted over it and just mad as what, and just wouldn't take it. And I was telling my mother at the time, and my mother was my mother remarried a man many years later, wonderful man, and he was dying of lung cancer, and he ended up dying 6 weeks before Kim and I got married. And but my mother went with me to get me a new dress because I was so brokenhearted, And that was a real bonding time for her and I to accept the fact that I actually was really going to marry this man with or without her blessing, you know. And it's funny because ultimately the woman I am today, I brought my tissue. I'm still in, I just like, my eyes leak over my mom. It's been a really hard transition for me. I went and did the whole bachelor's and master's. I have the 2-year postgraduate from the Gestaltist. I did a lot of education, but I am who I am today because of my mom. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
The wisdom, I said to her when she would get mad at me about how strong-willed I was, you are responsible for this. You know? And she was like, you know, my gosh, someday I'll get revenge. And then I had a daughter. And she got it. Yeah, Brianna's even stronger than me.
Yeah.
She is.
She's such a good girl. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that we could literally just let me sit down and have Sandra just fill you up when I ask you questions about business.
Yeah.
You know, I love having you here unplugged. Part of what makes this community so precious is the heart. And again, you're an incredible role model for what's possible of combining your heart and your head.
Thank you.
You know, not just an either or conversation. You always bring it. And I think I might have told you this before. I don't know who called you because lots of people have taken credit for calling you. By the way,
that right?
I posted on Facebook when Scott went in the hospital, and you were the first person to call me. And I was just like, it's SandraYancey.
Yeah.
Hi. And, you know.
I do.
Thanks for being a friend.
I think, you know, the thing that I've noticed about sometimes, you know, having communities is that, you know, when you're in crisis, people think that there's lots of people there for you, running to you. And the truth is, I think people think that everybody else is doing it, and it's hard to ask. And sometimes you just want. Sometimes you don't want to ask. You know, sometimes you just want for people to know that, you know, you are on their heart. And I somehow just felt like that could be happening to you. And I just wanted you to know that I was in prayer.
People called, and I think part of it was we had lots of amazing support, but I think, you know, people don't want to interfere.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just a dance, right? It's just a dance. So
Yeah, I'm an intruder.
I'm good at receiving now. I practiced, and I'm really good at receiving. So thank you. What would you say is the piece that had you really know when you were starting EWomenNetwork? Because again, your journey wasn't your typical overnight sensation.
Right. Oh,
You know?
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an 18-year overnight success.
Right. It's an 18-year overnight success. And I love one of the things that you say. I'm quoting you all the time, but one of the things, and I'm giving you full credit, but one of the things that I love that you say is don't compare your beginning with someone else's middle.
Yes.
You know, that's such an incredible writer-downer.
Yeah.
And something to remember, because we all kind of do it. We all kind of say, well, she's there. Why am I not there?
Yeah.
Right?
It's so easy for us to do, right? And, you know, and quit spending time with people committed to misunderstanding you would probably be my second greatest business piece of advice.
Well, I have actually my water bottle that has all of them.
Do you?
Gift
Okay,
always. Lift as you climb.
Exactly.
I've got my EWomen water bottle that I carry around with me.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
actually
proud
created
to put
water
it on.
bottles
Yes.
that, based on the ounce, was a saying, my favorite sayings. And, you know,
So great.
But I think that you know, you do have to run your path. And you know, the one thing about marrying a drummer, Kim was a drummer initially when I first met him on Capitol Records, and had a gold album, and you know, 6 albums, you know, on Capitol Records, and it was a great time to be young and in love. And but when he got his gold album, and he was at Capitol Records, and they were being presented with the gold album, the president of Capitol Records was talking to Kim about, so they were getting ready to go back into the studio and do their next album. So, you know, what are you planning on? And at the time in 1978, what was the most popular music? Disco music, right? So it was like the, you know, upbeat music, and Kim was a ballad writer, which is the thing that I loved about him. In fact, not a lot of people know this, but when we first met, remember the supper clubs? So we met at a supper club, and while we were there, you know, having drinks, me illegally, he was. He said, "Would you like to dance?" And I said, "I'd love to dance." He said, I'm gonna go, you know, tell the DJ, put in a recommendation." And so he did, and sometimes it takes 4 or 5 songs before your song that you recommend comes up. And so we're sitting and talking and getting to know each other, and the song comes up, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's one of my most favorite songs. And he takes my hand, he takes me on the dance floor, and I think I said, "You're not gonna believe it. That's one of my favorite songs." And so when he took me in his arms and we were dancing, he says, "Well, you're not gonna believe this." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "I wrote it." True story.
Close
Swear
the
to God.
deal.
I mean, that's what I went home and said, I think I met the man I'm going to marry.
The sales. Good job.
So reeling the story back in here, though, when he was getting his gold album, he was saying, well, I think I want to do some of the upbeat songs. I've been the ballad writer in the band. I want to do some of the upbeat songs. And the president said to him, you know, never forget, you know, that the world is looking for its next love song, right? I mean, think about it. Every year, aren't we looking forward to, it doesn't diminish any previous love songs. And in fact, some of them are so emblazoned on my heart that, I mean, I couldn't tell you what I ate last Wednesday for breakfast. But if a song from 30 years ago, you know, I know every word, right? And yet it doesn't diminish the next great song that's coming out. And so, you know, when I think about the message around don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle, I mean, you're the next love song. And there are people that are looking for you. There are people that are trying to find you. You have the melody that they're in alignment with. You have the beat they feel they can find, you know, a sense of balance in. And they're looking for you right now. And they just can't find you. And that's more the reason to say, I'm not just going to go for it. I'm going to go really big. I mean, if you begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey said, right? And I think one of the things that holds women entrepreneurs back, only 2% of us ever break $1 million in annual revenue, which is really alarming. The statistic has been true now for 17 years. The needle on the dial has not changed for 17 years. And it's really been a quest of mine to figure out, like, what is that? And I think some of it is that we think so incrementally. You know, like, let me just get here. Let me just get to 100,000. Let me just get to $250,000, whatever that is. What I would like to say is that I believe, from my own experience, from what I've been taught by people that have made billions of dollars. I've interviewed Mark Cuban and Hiram Smith I've had on my stages, who, you know, has done the, you know, Franklin Covey, billion-dollar business, Sarah Blakely, who's done $1 million with Spanx. You know, if you really do, you know, begin with the end in mind, and you just give yourself permission to say, I'm going for $1 million. The decisions that you make going for $1 million are different than the decisions you make you would make going incrementally. You see what I'm saying? Absolutely. I mean, it would just map out. You know, so, you know, it's important to know where you want to go, so that you are, you know, making sure that you're maneuvering on the right path. It just takes so much longer, in my experience, to make incremental steps than it does to simply give yourself permission to go really big.